Hey solos! So here's a question for you. Why would you, as a grown adult, go to Disney World solo? Well, here's a little solo spoiler for you because it's awesome. And you might already know that, or you might be a little solo curious, thinking like, yeah, I think it could be awesome. I want it to be awesome. Let's make this awesome. Hi, everyone. This is Samantha. Olaf might not know who Samantha is, but now you do. And welcome to this brand new podcast, Solo Magic, the magic of going to Disney World solo. In this podcast, I'm going to focus on stories, tips, tricks, and information so that you are able to navigate Disney World on your own solo and at least know what to expect to make the decisions that are right for you, or to be reaffirmed in your decision that solo travel to Disney is excellent and awesome, and to maybe get some other tips and tricks for maximizing that time when you go solo. Because this is a new podcast, I want to encourage you to subscribe and hopefully start rating so that other people can find this. And make sure you follow me on Instagram at Disney_solo_magic so that you are able to connect with me and I can hear about your experiences and maybe even potentially, I'm hoping, come on the podcast yourself and share your own solo stories. I plan on posting once a week, although I already know that there are going to be some bonus episodes, especially in the next month or so. So get ready for that. Again, make sure you subscribe so you know when they're coming out. And in this podcast, I don't just want to provide recommendations like, oh, definitely go to this restaurant, it's delicious. But I want to be able to provide some context so that when you are making decisions for yourself, you have some extra pieces of information to consider. Because here's the thing about solo travel. You can make all those decisions for yourself. So you don't need me to make a decision for you. That's why you're traveling by yourself, to make those decisions without anybody else kind of in your ear being like, I want to go here, I want to go there, this is my favorite. Now, I'll tell you my favorite, I'll tell you things I like. But again, as I'm going to say many times, this podcast is really about you thinking about all these different elements about what would make your solo trip amazing. In this particular episode, because it is a new podcast, I want to introduce myself, introduce some reasons why people travel solo, and also tell some stories about why traveling to Disney solo has been particularly meaningful and exciting for me. Okay, let's get into it. So let's start with a little bit about me so you know who you're listening to. So again, my name is Samantha. I'm in my early 40s. I'm a white woman who lives in Canada. I have a couple graduate degrees. I am single and I have no children. And for the last few years, like I said, I've been going to Disney solo and really enjoying it. When I was growing up as a kid, traveling to Disneyland or Disney World was an option for our family. We went a few times, but it wasn't like it was embedded in our family culture so that like every year we went to the same resort over and over again. Fast forward to my early 20s when I had a boyfriend, we started going to Disney World together. We went a few times and we always had a really fun time. And those early trips really kicked off my adult love for going to Disney World. But then there was a gap of like, I don't know, 9 years, 10 years or so where I didn't go to Disney World at all. And like, I really longed for it. And it didn't feel right at that time to go solo. I don't know why. I mean, I guess I can kind of think about a few reasons why. There was a lot going on, but I always really just wanted to go back. And in 2020, 2020, early 2020, I went to Jacksonville for a conference. And afterwards, I went to Orlando to go to Disney World. And I was like, oh my God, we are definitely doing this more often. That Jacksonville trip, I went with my mom. Sometimes we go together. And when we go together, actually, there's a lot of solo elements because she's very happy to be in Florida, but she doesn't need to, walk around Tomorrowland another time in her life, And during the pandemic, I watched a lot of vloggers. Shout out to Molly from All Ears at that time and DFB Guide. And now Molly, as many of you might know, is now part of Mammoth Club, or she is Mammoth Club. And it was a real interesting kind of thing to think about. Oh, when the when the pandemic is over, to go back and what would that look like. And ever since then, I've been going a few times a year. Everyone's always like, "You're going back?" Yeah, I'm gonna go back. Last year, I became an annual pass holder for the very first time. And so, because of hashtag girl math, I just assume I'm saving money every time I go because I'm using my annual pass, right? I would be wasting money if I wasn't using my annual pass to be able to get into the park. So, there you go. Now, solo travel is not rare to me, or like even just like solo excursions in the city are not rare to me. I have no problem hanging out with myself. I am one of the coolest people I know. Oh, no. I definitely think I am the coolest person I know. And so I don't have a problem like eating alone or going to a museum alone. I'll travel alone a lot, both just for like, personal health, but also for conferences. So the idea of solo travel is not new to me. But solo travel to Disney World, that is a little new. And I was thinking about why that might be. And I think because Disney World is so focused on families that it seems like if you aren't there with families and friends, you would feel very isolated. But when I started going after the pandemic, like I said, sometimes I'd go with my mom, it was really clear that there is so much more than just stuff for families, and that as a solo person, there are so many opportunities to explore things in a really safe, fun environment. So why do people travel solo just generally, not at Disney World? Well, they go because there's flexibility. They go because they don't need to like wait for someone to either go with them or do the things they want to do. People travel by themselves for self-discovery and reflection and maybe a little bit of therapy. People travel by themselves because it's easier to navigate if you're just one person. Like there's a lot of reasons why people travel solo generally, and I get that. But at Disney World, all of that gets like bumped up with extra magic. So, for example, if you are traveling to Disney World solo, you don't have to worry about somebody else's schedule, somebody else's priority list. You don't need to worry about someone else's energy level. And by that, I mean perhaps a temper tantrum. You don't have to worry about if somebody would rather sit back at the hotel room and watch a movie or watch the game. Like you can just do what you want to do. And because Disney World, with all the rides and all the food and everything, can be kind of like big and complicated, this ability just to like focus on what you want to do is so amazing. So I remember one time I was walking around Disney World. I was walking around Magic Kingdom. We were kind of heading out of the park. We were going from like It's a Small World past the Rapunzel bathrooms. We were like, rounding that particular corner, which, fun fact, is the narrowest walkway in all of the Walt Disney World Resort. Not just Magic Kingdom, but the whole Walt Disney World Resort, public facing areas. And I said to the person I was with, like, "Oh, do you want to go on Haunted Mansion again?" And they were like, "No." Oh, okay. I'm sorry I phrased that as a question. That wasn't a question, actually. I should have made it a statement. I am going on Haunted Mansion again. You are welcome to join me. If you don't want to join me, no problem. I will see you when the ride is done. But again, I asked it as a question because I was with someone and that way we can do something together. Oh, no. I want to go on Haunted Mansion again. I will be going on Haunted Mansion again. So when you're traveling solo, you don't need to worry about that, which is really great. And even things like food, right? Like if you travel with your kids, I assume many of you might be making decisions about where to eat based on like the easiest options for your kids, right? However, when you're traveling by yourself, you can go to a fancy restaurant or a fancy bar or a lounge and just like get whatever you want. Also, and as I tell like nieces and nephews and friends' children, because I'm an adult, I can eat ice cream for breakfast and dinner whenever I want. So sometimes my dinner is just like one of those bubble Mickey waffles with ice cream in it because, hey, I'm by myself. If that's what my dinner is, that's what my dinner is. I don't really go to Disney World for the rides. Like, yeah, I love a good Haunted Mansion and a Pirates of the Caribbean, but I'm not there to like, make sure I go on Tron all day, every day. I haven't actually even been on Tron, and it's not even like one of the things that I'm that interested in going to. So, yeah, like, again, doesn't matter. It's my trip. So I don't need to go if I don't want to. But a benefit about that flexibility and freedom when you're traveling by yourself to Disney World is that some of the rides have single rider lines, which means if you are by yourself, you can go in a separate line and then they just like pop you into whatever group there is. So I'm thinking of Expedition Everest. You can wait in the line, and actually that line is not usually that long, but then there's a single rider line, and if you are just going to sit beside a stranger anyway because you're by yourself, then that single rider line in some cases can be significantly shorter. In not all cases, but definitely ask a cast member. So you have a little bit of that perk to be able to kind of avoid some of those big lines if you wanted to. The same thing with like Genie Plus and the Lightning Lanes. Like, I know that a lot of people complain about the prices of the Genie Plus and Lightning Lanes, and understandably. But if you are paying like $25 for a family of 5, that's a huge price. But if you're paying $25 just for yourself, you can be like, oh, all right, well, that's not too bad. I don't know, I can afford that. I'll just have like a less expensive dinner, So it's easier to budget in that sense as well. Another reason why people travel by themselves at really any stage of life is because there is a sense of like self-discovery, relaxation, even a little bit of therapy. You get a chance to do some like connecting with yourself. And I know like for me, the solo vacations that I take, like this is a huge, huge part of it. To be able kind of to like to put yourself together again in like daily life. It's so easy for people to always like take a little bit of your mental energy or your emotional energy. If you're a parent, like I'm sure you feel that all the time, like everyone needs something from you, or even if you are living with someone and there's always like that extra kind of care work burden, maybe it's great, but maybe you also just are like, oh, I just want to spend some time by myself, only making decisions for myself. So you don't have to kind of like pretend or kind of put on airs about why you're there and what you're doing there. So I'm thinking of an experience I took. I went to an all-inclusive resort in Jamaica by myself a few years ago, and it was wonderful. It was a really, really great time. But I wore a fake wedding ring the whole time so that people weren't like, oh, you're single? Where's your room? Do you want me to walk you to your room? No, I definitely don't want you to walk me to my room. Thank you very much. Or when I went for dinner and people were like, oh, you're by yourself? Just one? And I'm like, yep, just one, no problem. And then again, very nice, well-meaning people being like, so you're just here, like sitting in the pool for a week? Like that's all you're doing? Yeah, that's all I'm doing. That's all I want to do. Meanwhile, if you do the same type of trip at Disney, like people are very, like cast members are very used to having people there by themselves. No one's going to make you feel awkward about it. I don't ever feel like I need to pretend that there's some big burly male around me to like fend off any attacks. Ugh, gross. It's so gross that we have to think about that as like women and femmes. Like, anyway, I know that's a huge thing. Also, because people like know you're just there to have fun. If they're like, oh, you're doing Haunted Mansion again? Oh, you're going down the water slide again? Like, it's totally, totally fine. And so you get that sense of being able to kind of push the limits of what you want to do because you know it is such a fun, safe environment in the Disney bubble. But another part of solo travel is self-discovery, right? And you discover more about yourself when you do things that like push yourself outside of your comfort zone. And maybe just like the idea of a solo trip is outside your comfort zone enough, and that's totally cool. But because Disney has so many things to do, there are so many opportunities for you to push the limits of your comfort zone in a really safe, controlled environment. So last year I went horseback riding at the Fort Wilderness, and I had never been horseback riding before, and I was so scared. I was like super anxiety ridden leading up to it, and then when I got there, I was sitting on the horse, and I was like, "What am I doing? This is crazy." But you know what? It was super safe. It was super easy and also a lot of fun. The cast members made me feel really comfortable. I never felt in danger. I got to see a deer in the woods. Like, I could see a deer and practically like Cinderella's castle at the same time. I mean, how magical is that? And while it was definitely not a very strenuous horseback riding experience. In fact, a friend of mine said, "Oh, horseback riding? Or were you just sitting on a horse that was walking slowly?" Okay, dear friends, dear solos, I was sitting on a horse who was walking slowly, but I've never done that before. And doing it at Disney, I felt so extra comfortable to be able to try something else that I feel really proud of myself. Like, it's been almost a year since that happened, and I feel very proud of myself for doing that. This isn't a solo story, but it's an adult traveling to Disney story. My one time I went with my mother, and we were staying at the Coronado Hotel, and they have a big pool there with a water slide. And I was like, "Mom, I'm gonna go down the water slide." And she's like, "You're an adult." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm an adult." So I went down the water slide, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's so much fun. You should try it." And she said, "Okay." And so she went down the water slide, and she's like, "That was so much fun." And like, my mother's in her early 70s. When's the last time she went down a water slide? I don't even know. Like, decades. So here's another example of like being able to push the limits, because what I find is that Disney World is like the most non-judgmental place I have ever been, ever considered. Like, you want to go and you want to do your thing and you want to push the limits, or you just want to just have a chill solo vacation, that is all available to you. And so to be able to do that with a sense of self-discovery, reflection, a little bit of like personal therapy, like that's really special. And that safety element, both in terms of like, threats to your personal safety, but also like the mental safety of feeling like, oh, I can do this and not be judged, or I can do this and know that there are cast members who can make sure that I get something that I need right after, right? Like, one time I went on, the only time I've ever gone on Mission Space, I had like a slight nervous breakdown because it shook up my whole body to the point where my brain was like, "No, we're not doing this anymore." And, like, cast members made sure that I had a place to sit. I was able to get a glass of water. And like, that's important. It's important to know that there are people around to protect you and to take care of you. And I think for a lot of adults, especially a lot of adult women, especially if you are parents or do caregiving work, like, the notion that you can get like taken care of by someone is really special. But to get taken care of by a whole city, a whole Walt Disney World Resort city, is also pretty cool. Another element about solo travel is to be able to explore in a way that, because you're one person, is, again, like, I think I already said easier to navigate, but to kind of bring that element in a little bit more. Okay, so back in my 20s, there was a group of us that we went to Animal Kingdom Lodge, and we wanted to see the animals in the public viewing area. And the zebras were like kind of walking away, so we couldn't see them anymore. And a cast member said to us, "Go into the hotel, walk down the hallway, any hallway where the rooms are, go to the end of the hallway, and then go out on the fire escape and stand on the fire escape, and you can see the animals from there. It's an even better view. Have fun. And this group, like this group, and we're like, yeah, no, we're not gonna we're not gonna just traipse through a hotel we're not staying at. Like, that seems weird. I went back a few years later, we got the same exact advice from a cast member. Go to the fire escape at the very, very end of the any of the halls in the hotel, and you're gonna be able to see the animals way better. Again, we were like, that seems weird, but that's I guess an option that we could do. Then I did the same trip by myself, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to try that fire escape trick, because I'm just one person by myself. Like, I don't know, it seems a little bit easier to kind of navigate this new hack and figure it out without this whole big group around me. And guess what? All those cast members were right. There is an excellent view of all of the animals of the safari at Animal Kingdom Lodge from the fire escapes. And there were a couple other people there, because it's not like I was sneaking around. It was very open, but as a solo person, it was easier for me to kind of try that hack, because I don't know, there was less bodies around me, there was less energy around me. It was much easier to do that. I also found a secret shower at the Coronado Springs Resort by one of the quiet pools, which was amazing. Like, I checked out of my room at 11 or whatever, but my flight wasn't until 9 p.m. And I was spending the whole day at the parks. Plus, I wanted to do a swim. And it'd be nice to take a shower, but I wasn't expecting to take a shower. But when I went into the women's bathroom by one of the small pools, there was another door, and I just opened that door, and there was a shower. It's like, oh, this is perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Again, when you're on your own, when you're with a group, are you doing that exploration? Maybe it will make you feel more brave if there were other people around. But for me to be able to try those things out by myself, to me, that's actually a lot less stressful. Plus, one time I bumped into, it was actually a couple. It wasn't somebody going solo, but again, if we're thinking about both adult trips and solo trips to Disney, I bumped into this couple, and they were like, we're actually here on a bit of a scouting mission. We are going to Disney World in a few months with our children and their children. So they were the grandparents, and we haven't been in a really long time. So we wanted to just actually have a really good time on our own. But we also wanted to keep an eye on things that we want to make sure that we do with the grandkids, or places that would be good for the grandkids to go or take, relax or something like that. So they were going to have the pleasure of going to Disney World without the burden, without the extras of having children around, but they were also there to do some exploring. So when they went with their grandkids and their own children, they had some information in their tool belt about elements that would make the best trip. So that's also a really good element. If you are a parent or a person that feels a lot of guilt, oh gosh, if I go by myself, then, I'm not going with my kids. You can also be well, I'm just happen to be exploring where the best ice cream is, so that when my children come with me the next time, I can tell them. It will just mean that I'll have to eat a lot of ice cream myself on this solo trip. And that sounds amazing. Let me just stay for a second on this topic of discovering things on your own, even if you're saying that it's a scouting mission for, the best ice cream for your kids or whatever. Let's say you don't think of yourself in your daily life as someone who is brave, that you would actually rather be around other people to make those decisions about, exploring a new part of a hotel or something like that. But when you're traveling by yourself, you get to be who you want to be. Right? You actually get a chance to not just be who people know you to be, but you can try out some different elements of your personas to really kind of, again, learn more about yourself. So I was at a Garden Rocks concert, which is part of the Flower and Garden Festival at Epcot last year. And I was going to see a band that I wanted to see. And in other times I've gone to concerts, I've just kind of like sat and watched the show. Like, that's what I want to do. I've come to sit and watch the show. But there was something about being there by myself, watching a band that I flew to another country to go see, because again, I'm Canadian. I'm like, I just want to get up and dance. And so I got up and I got up and I danced. I was sitting in one of the very front rows, and I just had the most amazing time because I didn't have to worry about people that I was with thinking to themselves like, oh, that's not usually how she acts. Like, people around me, they were all strangers. They were all happy to watch that band, and they were happy that I was happy. Like, nobody cared. And so you can, again, like, push those limits of who you are so that you can come back to your real life, your daily life, with a greater sense of connection to yourself, understanding about who you are, a bigger view of what could be possible. I mean, every time I come back from solo trips, I feel that way. And, it is true that as an adult traveling to Disney solo, or traveling to Disney at all, for those people who don't really know or don't really get it, like, sometimes there can be a little judgment. I appreciate that, and that will be a topic I'll cover in another episode. And so I make sure to kind of protect those experiences. I bring with me in my daily life what I learned about myself to have a bigger, broader sense of self when I get back home in my daily life. But I also want to protect those experiences that I had if I don't feel like people are going to really appreciate the full extent of how cool it was to talk to Mirabelle about the embroidery on her skirt. Like, if you don't get that, you don't get the story either. And instead, I'll just come back to work and be like, that Mirabelle has a couple different colors on her embroidery for these reasons. Like, I'll just keep that to myself. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you've heard all these stories about me. Hopefully you get a kind of a sense of who I am, and will hopefully like to come with me metaphorically on this podcast journey together, where again, I'll tell more stories if you like them, I guess, and some tips and tricks and information about traveling to Walt Disney World as an adult, but especially an adult who is going solo. And what I also hope that maybe you heard from my stories are like little connections to your own stories of traveling solo, or little connections to the reasons why you might want to go solo, and think to yourself like, yeah, I could do that, or I want to do it this way, but I still want to do it, right? Like, that's amazing. That's so exciting. And so, like I said, you've heard from me in this episode. I do want to hear from you. So let's connect on Instagram, Disney_solo_magic, and start telling me about why you go to Disney solo, or what makes you solo curious, because that can be a topic of a future podcast. Make sure you subscribe and rate so that other people can find this podcast, but that you also will know when new episodes will drop. At least for the next couple months, there will be one episode a week with some bonus episodes in there. And my hope, my plan, my desire for this podcast is that it can grow so that there'll be guest speakers that you can come share your stories, that maybe you want to come and interview me about your own experience, about the questions that you have about going solo, but maybe you want to come and talk about your own experiences, something that you learned about yourself, or or some sort of like secret tip or trick that you have, that you never would have done if you were there with your family, but you were like, if you were solo, make sure you do this. So again, let's make sure that we connect on Instagram. The link is in the bio. And what's coming up? Okay, so I wanted to talk about like the different types of hotels and why you might choose one type of hotel or one category of hotel over another. But I realized that there's so much history behind why there are 5 value resorts versus moderate resorts, that I thought that would be useful too. So my next episode is going to be the lay of the land, or the lay of the world. Walt Disney World. So just kind of lay out how big Walt Disney World is and what that might mean for a solo traveler. To me, it's amazing. To me, it's amazing how big it is and how much there is to do. Then I'm going to talk about the different hotel categories, which became like this super, super long episode. So in the summer, I'm also going to have a series where I'm talking about all the individual value and moderate resorts and what are some pros and cons for going to those specific resorts as a solo traveler. But right now, I'm just going to talk about the categories of hotels. Then I'm going to talk about the categories of restaurants, like all the different types of restaurants and why you might want to choose one type of restaurant over another. And after we get those big overview pieces, I'm going to go through all 4 parks and Disney Springs about not what there is to do as a solo traveler, because again, I don't want to provide you recommendations because you need to recommend things to yourself. Instead, I'm going to provide some information that can help you make your own decisions. And interspersed with all that, I'm also going to talk about the Flower and Garden Festival for Epcot and tell you about my upcoming solo trip to Disney. I'm going twice in April and once in May, and I'm really, really excited. So you're going to hear some of those solo stories as well. All right, everyone. I can't wait to take this journey with you, like together but separate, solo but connected. And I can't wait to get to know you. And we will talk to you next week.